Hello, our students. Today we're going to talk about 2017 한양 University 글로벌 인재 어학 특기자. This is their mock essay. I love Hanyang University because they put together mock essays every twice a year, or twice a year every year. Whichever that is correct. But and they are by far the most precise about their criteria and their questions. However, one thing for sure for everyone to know is that their questions, their passages have always been more difficult on their actual tests than their mock tests. So consider mock tests as a stepping stone. And this is one of the mock tests. Depending on how you look at it, it could be very complex and very difficult. But in the 2017, the actual, it was also a lot more difficult than this one. So,
That's a good tip in itself.
Yeah. Anyway, today we're going to talk about altruism. And since some of our students enjoy my bacon joke, I brought a little comic and comic strip from Peanuts, Charlie Brown Peanuts. And it starts like this. Lucy and Charlie Brown talks, and Lucy begins, "I'm intrigued by this view you have on the purpose of life, Charlie Brown." And she continues, "You say we're put here on Earth to make others happy." He says, "That's right." And they think for a while. And then Lucy asks again, "What are the others put here for?" So, we must think that some people are born good and some people are here to serve, but then some people are quite selfish, right? And that's what we're going to talk about, the paradox of altruism. Before we even get to the passages, could you maybe throw some basic ideas about paradox of altruism, why it's important?
Yeah, so the idea of altruism is there are a couple of different formulations of it. The basic philosophical formulation is altruism would be the intentional doing of an act that didn't benefit you, but benefited another party, another person.
Right.
So there are examples in nature of this, of like bees that would sting, essentially committing suicide in an attempt to defend the hive, or mothers who would, selflessly throw themselves, in front of something to save a child, and things like this. These are classically considered altruistic acts. And they would be also, this would be like biological altruism too, which is basically the same as philosophical altruism, but intention is not taken into account. It's just the behavior that you do. It doesn't matter what you intended. We kind of covered this in one of our other videos, talking about behaviorism and things like this.
Right.
And the basic argument is, or the basic disagreement is genuine altruism possible?
Right.
Is it possible for a creature, especially the human creature, is it even possible for us to have a genuinely altruistic act? Or is all altruism actually egoism in disguise? That's the question.
Right.
Yeah.
I think one of our beloved writer, Peter Singer, had actually written a book and where he talks about, is there human essence that never changes, or human essence that never changes. And he said he points altruism as one of them. He actually I think he made a TED talk about this too.
It's a very human-centric view. Right.
Another thing to note, we're going to talk about this guy many, many times, but Charles Darwin. We know him, most people know him as, the guy who wrote The Origin of Species. But then today we're going to talk about him as the first person who had basically made altruism a scientific inquiry. So, let's get to it. Passage A. Humans are social creatures and care about others as well as themselves. Altruism is commonly considered as an individual's action which is at a cost to the actor. For example, pleasure, time, possibility of survival or reproduction, but benefits another third-party individual without the expectation of reciprocity or compensation for that action. Taking care of children, treating the sick, helping coworkers, volunteering as a tutor, or a fix-it person. These are all forms of everyday altruism. A model of political community often recognizes altruism as a powerful human motive. The term altruism may also refer to an ethical doctrine that claims that individuals are morally obliged to benefit others. Used in this sense, it is usually contrasted with egoism, which is defined as acting to the benefit of oneself. Briefly about passage A. What's your take on this?
Well, it says very casually, these are all forms of everyday altruism. And I think one thing that students can do when they're answering these questions is try and pinpoint in the passage where there are unsupported assumptions.
Okay.
Especially when you come to these kind of logic-based or sort of they're testing your analytical skills as well as your writing and expression of your ideas. If you can pick up on where there are unproven assumptions, then that would be great, I think. And this is definitely one of them. It just assumes that these are all forms of everyday altruism, but that is in fact the question that is at hand, right?
Right.
Are these in fact altruism? Or are you just, for example, helping your coworker because later they might share their lunch with you?
Right.
Yeah.
And you are expecting reciprocity, right?
Yeah, maybe.
I've done this, so please, give me back the favor that I have.
Even on an unconscious level, that might be what's going on.
And, like birthdays, for instance, right? We attend people's birthday parties. We attend people's wedding.
Yeah, right.
Expecting that, because I've been there and I pay my tribute. So something like that. And these are also socially accepted reciprocities that are, if you don't follow, it's socially uncool. Right? Yeah. And let's move on. B, do people truly do things for others, or do they ultimately always serve the self? According to biologists, their answer about the roots of altruism rests on genes. Some parts of a gene, the so-called selfish alleles, cause selfish behavior, whereas the other parts of the gene, the so-called altruistic alleles, cause altruistic behavior. They view altruism from the gene's vantage point. To illustrate this, let's consider parental altruism. Say in a population of birds, some parents in the population may harbor altruistic alleles. These parents provide for their chicks as best as they can. Others may harbor selfish alleles that dispose them to eat their chicks' food or to look the other way when a predator approaches the nest to look for prey. What is the fate of these different alleles in the course of many generations? An altruistic allele that makes a parent sacrifice itself in the right moment will survive in the offspring. On the other hand, an allele that makes the parent look the other way causes death of its offspring, and as a consequence, will not make it into the next generation. To evolutionary biologists, it is the altruistic allele that persists over the generations, which accounts for why parents take care of their offspring, but not of unrelated individuals. After all, the altruistic behavior serves the self. So, B ends with saying altruistic behavior serves the self. So, A ended with sort of open-ended question, and B sort of asserts.
Yeah, definitely.
Right? And your take on B?
Well, and B asserts a proposition that seems to explain all the points in A, and basically say that all of those things are actually not altruism. They're actually just serving the self. So even when we do something for other people that has absolutely no behavioral, external benefit to us,
right,
it still makes us feel good. And there is actually a lot of research out there that does suggest that we don't have these like brutish natures, which, that kind of Hobbesian idea of being brutish creatures. And then we use our higher moral functions to suppress that brutish behavior and act altruistically. There's a lot of evidence to suggest that actually it's hardwired into our brain for altruism to feel good. And that is very interesting if you look at it, because it kind of undercuts a lot of the philosophical talk and just makes us a creature again.
Earlier, we talked about bees. Right? How, a honeybee might use its sting, and, as it does, it's going to die, right? However, what about the thought that they're doing that because it's part of their system? If you're a honeybee, if you're a working bee, if you're a protector of the beehive, then that it is your duty. I mean, queen does nothing else but just making children.
Just reproduce, yeah.
Right? So same thing. Can't we say that they are sacrificing not because, they are altruistic or selfish, but because that's how they are programmed, hardwired to do or to be.
Yeah, and if you look at it on an individual level with humans, people will say, oh, well, this is not altruistic behavior. This is just the individual making sure that their genes continue. Well, then if you're an insect and you're a worker ant, you are never going to reproduce.
Right.
It's anatomically impossible.
Right.
Your purpose was just to serve the hive, the group's passing on of its genetic material. And if you look at it in that way, then it's kind of scary, but it also does seem to explain a lot. Like we weren't all going to pass on our genetic material.
And it's a very scary. it's a dooming idea.
Yeah.
That maybe you're there to just serve the middle class and the upper class in a human being sense.
Yeah, terrifying, right?
Just like honeybees, all you're going to be doing for your entire life is collect pollens and honey and care for the babies, and then you're going to die. And if someone intrudes, then you're going to use your sting and get yourself eviscerated and die. Right?
But here's the ironic part. This is a little bit off topic, but the ironic part is that actually it would be the lower classes that reproduce, if you look at the numbers.
Right. To
the highest degree. And it's the more educated, the more upper class and the more educated you become, the less you actually pass on your genetic material.
Right.
So it seems like almost another paradox right there. Biological altruism, this idea that we're, it's just hardwired or something. It takes that into account. So it's in that sense, it's kind of compelling.
Right. Okay. The last one.
Yeah.
Rational choice theory. So already C speaks of something else, right? So for students as a strategy, it will be important to make a note here, or another easier way is to always look at the question right away, because in this case, you don't get a lot of time to read and write essays. So if you read the question, it'll actually say, okay, different ideas, views depicted in A and B, and then later on, you're going to have to talk about prisoner's dilemma in C, which prisoner dilemma has more to do with egoism than altruism. So students should know that, okay, this is something to do with A, B together and then C separate, right? Just like when you are writing, say, integrated essay in TOEFL, right? They're going to make contrasting ideas between the reading passage and the listening. So going back, C, rational choice theory demonstrates the obstacles to cooperation among people with an important concept. The prisoner's dilemma has a storyline. Two men have been rounded up and imprisoned in separate cells. The prosecutor believes they committed a crime but doesn't have sufficient evidence to convict them. With the help of the prison guards, the prosecutor contrives a situation to win a conviction. The guards present each of the men with some choices but don't permit them to talk with each other. Here are the choices. If you confess and agree to testify against your partner, he will be brought to book and you'll get immunity for turning state's evidence. Likewise, if your partner confesses but you don't, he'll get immunity and you'll get the book. If you both remain silent, we're going to give you a slap for some minor charges and let you go. If you both confess, however, you'll both be punished, but with moderate sentence. Less than the book, but more than just a slap. Even though the prisoners would receive the least severe punishment if they both stay silent, they will both confess and testify against the other. Betraying the other partner is the rational thing to do. If you want to minimize your sentence and maximize your own well-being. Why? If you're not sure you can trust the other partner to cooperate, you had better rat on him. Because if he rats and you don't, you'll get the slammer. Even if you both rat on each other, you'll still get less than the slammer. And therefore, betrayal in this case is the wisest course of action as predicted by the rational choice theory. Okay, so that's C. Now, A, B strictly talked about how we might be altruistic or maybe not. C deliberately goes into rational choice and how it's actually a wiser choice to be selfish.
Yeah. And I noticed in this one, there were a lot more sort of colloquial terms that the students might not understand.
Right.
But given the context, they should, I think, be able to work it out. It says brought to the book. It's, given the book.
Right.
You don't need to know exactly the meaning of that term to figure out that it's a negative thing. And at the bottom, it does tell you in Korean, what brought to the book, brought to book means.
Right.
And
rat on.
Yeah, and rat on someone. Yeah, these are common terms, but we should be able to parse what it means using those. Mm-hmm. It's an interesting thought experiment, this one. And it does show us that, you could look at that and say, well, if they both just don't say anything, then they're both just going to get out. But the fact is that you don't know what the other person's going to say. And he has a high incentive to rat on you.
Right.
So just to be safe, you have to rat on him too. And it kind of shows us that maybe our behavior can be better explained using the theory of rational egoism. Mm-hmm. In the sense that it's rational to be egoistic and just look out for yourself. And in this situation, we're showing clearly that is the rational thing to do.
And just to add on to the basics of Prisoner's Dilemma, it is used to explain or further explain or easily explain John Nash's Equilibrium. And he got Nobel Prize because he took a different path than Adam Smith.
Adam Smith said, the best result comes from everyone in the group doing what's best for himself, right? That's what he said, that's right? Incomplete. Okay? Because the best result would come from everyone in the group doing what's best for himself and the group.
Ash, this is some way for you to get the blunt on your own. You can go to hell.
Governing dynamics, gentlemen. Governing dynamics. Adam Smith. Who's wrong?
Yep, here we go.
Careful.
Thank you.
Anyway, so could you give us some idea about how A, B, and C take slightly different stance on the idea of altruism?
Yeah, so in the first one, it's kind of making the assumption that that altruism is something that drives human behavior, the genuine sort of desire or compulsion or whatever, at least propensity to engage in activities that don't directly benefit ourselves.
Right.
That's the pro-altruism side, if you will.
Right.
Here it's put forward in a kind of philosophical altruism sense. Like these are actions that you intend to do. That intention is important, and that's going to benefit other people and not you. B, on the other hand, talks about purely in a biological sense. Yes, we do exhibit altruistic behaviors, but they're purely biological.
Right.
That may make them less appealing to some people.
We don't do good deeds because we want to do it, or
because they're good.
Yeah, we care for honor and goodness, but we have it in us.
Yeah, we just do it because it benefits us, or it's hardwired, or for whatever reason we're genetically programmed for whatever reason to do those things. And then it does suggest at the end that altruistic behavior does actually benefit you. So even if it wasn't an egoistic a reason for doing that behavior, in the long run it is actually going to benefit you. So there's a little crossover there. Actually, there's a little gray area there. The kids might want to, or the students might want to explore. Right. But the simplest way to go about it would be to have this. The first part is philosophical altruism. B is an exponent of biological altruism. And then the third one being a classic example of rational egoism. The complete opposite of that. Like, it does not benefit you to be altruistic. And not only does it not benefit you, that's just not a path that you're going to take if you're a rational human being. And that all people have that kind of rationality, and it's not in our nature to be that way. Rational, smart human being, if you were, right? Yeah. So the students can use that as a really easy way to compare and contrast these various ideologies. Because, after all, that is part of the point of these essays, to tease out the point, to find the point, and to use that to compare bigger ideas. Right. This is just a small paragraph about one small thing, but what we're discussing is bigger ideas, and can the student find ways between the text and those bigger ideas? What are some of the connections that you would make if you were to write this essay? Maybe you will pick out this from passage A, this from passage B, and this from passage C. So I would definitely take out, from the first passage, I would talk about that kind of unspoken assumption that altruism is a, what was it say? Everyday altruism is a powerful human motive. And that's that is a very strong statement in the first paragraph. And anytime you see like a really strong statement like that, that's perfect fodder for you to compare that against something else.
Right.
Especially if it's an unproven assumption, because then that means you can get more deeply into it.
Of course.
In the second paragraph, the talk of altruistic alleles and selfish alleles for students who weren't aware, just basic genetic, variations in genetic coding. We can just think of it as just genes, simply. But everyone has either altruistic or selfish alleles, and they'll basically drive behavior one way or the other. But both of them are going to be for the overall well-being of the organism.
Right.
Maybe that's the individual organism in the case of selfish alleles, or the group organism in the case of altruistic alleles. We could talk about things like kin selection. There's an interesting story about vampire bats. It's a cool name, but what they actually end up doing was sharing a huge cave, and they have to eat all the time. If they don't eat for like 60 hours, they starve to death.
Right.
So 80% of them should starve to death. So what they do is they go up to a bat that's near them, lick them, and then the other one vomits blood. Yeah, and then they drink that blood. And if they didn't engage in that activity, they would all die.
Right.
So that's kind of biological altruism. They have the desire, compulsion, programming to engage in altruistic behavior that doesn't benefit the individual directly, but it benefits the genes.
Right.
It benefits the group, passing along its genetic material.
The kingdom or the system.
Yeah, right? the bigger picture, yeah. And so that's something in B that I would definitely pick out as one of the major points, especially that last sentence, because like you said, that is a strong statement again.
Right.
And then the third one, this is where you're going to be able to do a lot of contrasting about rational egoism, and this is where you'll be able to insert your own opinion too. Like, do you think that humans are driven by egoism, or do these other explanations of altruism, be it philosophical or biological, they appeal to you?
And you're gonna compare those points with the C, where by making rational choices, you will serve yourself better.
Yeah.
Right? And you might conclude it with that.
Yeah, right. and the student could actually get quite deep into this. They could say, we are rationally egoistic, but then what benefits us, what we think benefits us, is actually hardwired programming that benefits the group. So, for example, one thing I figured out when I got a little bit older was that helping the people around me makes me feel good.
Right.
So if I ever feel bad, in a bad mood, or I'm not feeling great that day, I engage in the purely selfish behavior of trying to make everybody around me feel better.
Right.
I might buy gifts. I might be extra kind to people. And I'm engaged in rational, egoistic behavior.
Right.
But I'm benefiting everybody, including myself. So it's, on the surface of it, it's altruism. I'm using my time, my resources, my energy to help other people. But I'm actually doing it from an egoistic point of view.
Right. To make you feel better.
To make me feel better, yeah.
Right.
So it's kind of a chicken or the egg thing. Which comes first, that kind of biological programming, or my desire to help people?
Understood.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. As the last thing of the day, let's go over some of the essays. Another great thing why I love Hanyang University, it gives out sample essays. So let's there are 3 sample essays given by the university. There's one-page one. We call it the C, both the passage A and B, the one that starts with. And then the one that starts with, ever since the inception of human thought processes, we'll call that essay A. And then the views on the human motive behind altruism has been debated. We call that essay B. Now, which one did you like best?
Well, looking through these 3, and I agree, that's a really invaluable resource, right? That they give these sample answers out. I mean,
Of course.
if they're doing that and you're not looking, then you're making a mistake. Yeah.
You're a fool if you don't do it.
Yeah. I would go with B for this one.
Okay.
There are a few reasons why I like B. I found this person, and I could feel this through their writing. They seem to be quite a meticulous thinker.
Right, right.
The way that they compare and contrast these two, specifically comparing, especially the two passages A and B, was really meticulous. The way, and I can feel that from their writing. Obviously, there are mistakes here, of course.
Right.
But the grammar is mostly really good, and the way they go through it was they covered a lot of things, a lot of detailed points. I really liked that. That's in contrast to if you look at essay A,
Right.
that reads like a list. It's a very, very well written list.
Right, right.
But nonetheless, it's a list. It's this is A and this is B and this is C, and that is never going to get you more than a very, very average grade.
For C, I thought this one reads more like a TOEFL essay than a college essay. And, it's not bad. And that's probably why the university had chosen it. But still, I think the structure of it was too simple.
Yeah, too simple. Yeah, it feels like a C essay, like a C grade essay.
Okay.
But B, on the other hand, was quite impressive.
Right.
Especially with the first two parts, A and B.
Definitely, you could see. We talked about paradox of altruism and how it was laid out, and SAB was right on point with the right terms, and it made the right transitions with the comparisons. Now, I do want to say, though, Hanyang University does care about structure, but it cares more about what you're putting on. Now, among Hanyang University, Yonsei University, Korea University, and all the other universities that test students' speaking abilities or writing abilities, Hanyang is the most meticulous about what is being on the paper. And they take particular notion or give more credits to the students who can summarize the correct ideas the best. So in a way, compared to Yonsei University, where students are going to get points whether you are correct or not, for as long as you give good reasons behind, right? So therefore, for Yonsei University, if you could give quirky ideas, but if you could back it up, you actually may be the winner. However, for Hanyang University, the professors will look for specific answers. And in this case, you'll have to know what the paradox of altruism is, and some of the people in regards to that. I do agree. This one seems more of a list, though it's well-written list, and student definitely knows his stuff.
Yeah.
Another thing I love about B is this student makes his own example. At the very bottom of the first page, for example, when a person volunteers to tutor a fellow student, so and so and so, right? And that is something different than other two essays.
Yeah, and also if you look at the SAB, it takes many points directly from the text, which I think is a great habit.
Right,
and I definitely know that in universities in England, that's also something that is highly encouraged. We're not talking take huge chunks, of course not. We're not wasting space.
Right.
But we're taking key phrases. He mentions sacrificing themselves at the right moment, altruistic alleles. But also, which I thought was impressive about B, is that B even introduces their own vocabulary into this.
Right.
At the perfect time, without respecting reward because they feel conscientiously obliged to do so. That's a beautiful turn of phrase, even for a native speaker.
Right.
They compel organisms to sacrifice themselves. This is really good, even on the level of just plain vocabulary and grammar.
Right.
It's really good.
If you are preparing for Hanyang University, B is a definitely very well-written one. And you should study the level of vocabulary, the level of, or style even, of comparison and summarizing the idea.
Yeah, and just replacing, just the very simple act of replacing common vocabulary words with a slightly more luxurious.
Right.
Like here it has, where was it here? Meanwhile, passage B, meanwhile, even just this grammar.
Right.
Passage B, meanwhile, presents a belief that, this just little notes, and then the next sentence, taking the rational choice theory delineated in passage C into account. I'm gonna parse these arguments. I'm not gonna talk about. I'm gonna parse the arguments. Things like this. These are more
it gets
impressive.
teachers excited.
Yeah, it really does. And that matters.
I mean, at heart, we're both English teachers. And you know, when you see a student able to write stuff like this, it just excites us.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, it puts the student in a special light to see that this student has this kind of ability to use this kind of words. And because I know many of the students will dare to write it, but they might run out of time. So in order to be able to write this well, you know, he or she would have had to read the passages very quickly and then engage in the essay. Once he or she was done, go back, read again, and change some of the words to make it sound better.
Yeah, and this takes practice.
All right, definitely.
There's no shortcut to that. You just have to write a lot of essays.
Yes. So if you are preparing for Hanyang University, I highly encourage you to read these essays out loud and take some of the expressions to your arsenals, to your book of expressions. And especially with, once again, Hanyang Universities, get into the habit of rating your essays to yourself, because that will also encourage you to build style. And you will start to see what you consider to be a beautiful piece of writing, beautiful piece of expression, and you will learn to acquire more and more each time you do so.
And also, like, for example, we found out that we weren't particularly impressed by essay A. If the student can take 3 essays and they identify one as the weakest, how would they improve that?
All right.
Grade that essay, go through it, exchange some of the words, improve the vocabulary, analyze why is it weak? This kind of active, what would the word be? Active studying, not just doing things as rote and memorizing, but actively engaging with the text can really, I feel like, trigger some more pathways in your brain.
Right, because you take a different role, not just being a student, but you also become a teacher. And you get to see the test, the whole thing in a different light. So anyway, this was, once again, it had been very interesting. And thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And good luck, guys.